You ever notice how people get so nervous, so fidgety the moment you mention names? Not saints, not heroes, no, no. No, that wouldn't make their hearts race. I'm talking about the kind of names whispered in dark corners, the kind people avoid saying out loud because they're terrified it might summon the truth they've been hiding from. Everyone pretends they don't know who these people are, as if ignorance is some sort of charm that keeps the monsters away. Funny thing is, the monsters they fear aren't hiding under beds. They walk around in daylight, smiling, shaking hands, making promises they never planned to keep. You know, people get nervous the moment you even suggest that evil has a name. They shift in their chairs, clear their throats, pretend they suddenly care about something on the floor. Because naming something, oh, that makes it real. Too real. It's easy to whisper about danger in shadows, to talk about villains in vague little circles where nobody ever has to commit to anything. But the moment you say, there it is, that one right there, people start panicking. Not because they doubt you, they panic because deep down they already knew. They saw the signs, they felt the wrongness in the room. They sensed the cold slickness of someone's intentions, but they swallowed it because pretending is so much easier than facing the truth. That's the funny thing about humans. They claim to hate lies, yet it's the truth that terrifies them the most. Lies are soft pillows. Lies help them sleep. Lies give them excuses, alibis, tiny blankets they wrap around their trembling little fears. But the truth knocks. The truth bangs on the door in the middle of the night and demands to be let in. And people aren't ready for that kind of visitor. So they choose ignorance. They choose silence. They choose to hope that if they don't say the names, maybe the danger will dissolve into thin air on its own. But evil doesn't dissolve. Evil grows. It feeds on silence the way a fire feeds on oxygen. You try to smother it by pretending it isn't there, and all you're doing is giving it more room, more air, more space to thrive. And oh, how it thrives. It disguises itself behind polite nods, charming grins, sweet, sounding promises that taste like sugar but rot like poison. It sits across from you at the dinner table. It jokes with you. It pats you on the back. It watches how you react, studies your weaknesses, keeps track of the fears you think you're hiding. And you let it. You invite it in. You give it a seat, because it's easier to play along than confront what you already know. People love masks. They wear them, admire them, trust them. And when someone evil wears one, they applaud the performance. They refuse to question it because questioning means risking the comfort they cling to like a lifeline. So when you finally say, these two people, yes, them, are the problem, you're not just revealing their names. You're tearing down a whole world built on denial. You're ripping the mask off the faces people have grown attached to. And no one likes losing what's familiar, even when what's familiar is eating them alive. The moment you speak the truth, you force everyone else to make a choice. They can no longer hide behind ignorance. They can't pretend they didn't notice the manipulation, the cruelty, the subtle little wicked things that slipped through the cracks. Suddenly their silence becomes complicity, and that scares them more than any villain ever could. They start sweating, blaming, deflecting, pointing fingers anywhere but at themselves, because accepting truth requires courage, and courage is rarer than honesty, and honesty is already almost extinct. The beauty of naming evil is that it strips away its power. People act like speaking it aloud will summon some monstrous creature from the depths. But the opposite happens. When you put a spotlight on darkness, it shrinks, it panics, It scrambles. Because evil thrives in shadows, in whispers, in conversations that never quite reach clarity. When you drag it into the light, you force it to tremble. You force it to reveal what it really is: small, desperate, cowardly. You force people to stop pretending the danger is imaginary and finally acknowledge the threat that's been sitting beside them all along. But naming those two people isn't really about them. It's about you. It's about the moment you decide you're done playing along, done being quiet, done being polite, done letting your fear stop you from pointing to the rot you've smelled for far too long. It's the moment you lift your chin, clear your throat, and speak the truth everyone else is too afraid to touch. The moment you stop participating in the collective delusion that everything is fine when it clearly isn't. The moment you say, no more masks, no more whispers, no more pretending. Manipulators are fascinating creatures, aren't they? They move through life like dancers on a stage, every step rehearsed, every gesture polished, every smile sharpened, just enough to make you lean in without realizing a knife is tucked behind their back. They don't need weapons, no. They use something far more powerful: charm, timing, and the delicious ability to pretend they care. That's their trick, their magic, making you believe you're safe while they study you like a puzzle they plan to dismantle piece by piece. You ever notice how they always look so harmless, so ordinary? That's the beauty of their design. They've learned that a mask must blend in, not stand out, so they hide behind warm greetings, firm handshakes, little compliments that slide into your mind like honey. They act harmless so you never think to guard yourself. Because why would you? They look gentle, polite, helpful. But behind those polite little gestures is a mind calculating every move you might make, every weakness you might reveal, every insecurity you've tucked under your ribs hoping nobody sees. And oh, they see it. They always see it. People think manipulation is loud, dramatic, obvious. But real manipulative power is quiet, whispered, casual. It's the comment disguised as concern, the advice wrapped in poison, the sympathy that feels warm until you realize it's only warm because it's draining something from you. Manipulators don't attack. They lure. They don't demand trust. They coax it out of you like a secret you didn't even mean to share. And once they have it, they tuck it away like ammunition. The funniest part is how people defend them. Oh, how they defend them. They didn't mean it. You're overthinking? They're just stressed. Excuses, 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 served up like candy to protect someone who has no intention of protecting them back. That's how manipulation works. It convinces everyone around you that you're the unreasonable one for even noticing the wrongness. It turns the truth into something impolite to mention. And soon the manipulator has everyone dancing to a tune only they can hear. But you can always spot them if you watch closely enough. Not by what they say, no, words are their playground. You watch for the tiny cracks in their mask when someone challenges them. Watch how their eyes sharpen for a split second, how their smile twitches, how their voice tightens before smoothing itself out again. You watch how they react when they're no longer the center of attention, how they shift when someone stronger steps into the room. Manipulators hate losing control, even for a moment. Their entire identity depends on steering the thoughts and emotions of everyone around them. And what drives them? Not strength, never strength. It's hunger. A deep, gnawing hunger for significance they can't create on their own. They don't build anything. They just attach themselves to what others have built. They don't grow, they leech. They need people who believe in them, admire them, obey them, fear them. Because without an audience, they're nothing but empty shells with fancy disguises. That emptiness is what makes them dangerous. People without a core will do anything to feel powerful, even if that power comes from stepping on the very people who trusted them. But here's the twist. Manipulators don't choose their victims randomly. They target the kind, the patient, the forgiving, the ones who blame themselves before ever suspecting someone else. They go after the people who carry their own wounds quietly, the ones who think boundaries make them difficult. They feast on empathy like it's a buffet, and they count on the fact that you won't call them out, because calling them out means conflict, and conflict terrifies the very people they prey upon. When you finally see through them, really see through them, it feels like waking up in a room where the walls were much closer than you realized. You replay conversations, moments, gestures. Suddenly everything feels sharp, intentional. The harmless laugh wasn't harmless. The comforting touch wasn't comforting. The advice wasn't advice. You see the machinery behind their smile, the calculations behind their kindness. And once you see it, there's no unseeing it. Manipulators hate when the illusion breaks. They panic, rage, play the victim, paint you as the villain for daring to recognize what they truly are. Because the moment you stop responding to their strings, they lose control. And losing control is something they cannot tolerate, not even for a brave. People don't fear villains. Not really. They fear the moment they finally have to admit the truth they've been tiptoeing around. They fear the instant when the illusion they've been hugging like a childhood blanket begins to tear, thread by thread, and they're forced to look at what's been standing right in front of them the entire time. Truth doesn't creep up gently. It arrives with a jolt. It slaps the breath out of your lungs, leaves you blinking, shaking, wondering how you didn't see it sooner. And when people say they're afraid of someone, oh, it's rarely the person. It's what that person reveals about the world, about themselves, about the fragile little fantasies they've been living inside. People fear what they can't predict. That's the root of it. A bird flapping its wings wrong startles them. A stranger holding eye contact a second too long unnerves them. Imagine then what happens when someone notices what others missed, sees beyond the surface, cuts through the polite nonsense. Suddenly everyone's uncomfortable. Suddenly they're whispering. What did they find out? What did they see? Because once you expose a truth, every lie in the room begins to sweat. There's this comical thing humans do. They pretend everything's fine, even while the ground cracks beneath them. They sit at the dinner table smiling, laughing, while their instincts scream that something is off. Instinct is inconvenient after all. It interrupts routines. It challenges comfort. So they ignore it until someone else notices the smell of smoke. And once that someone dares to mention it, everyone panics, not because they didn't smell it too, but because now they can't pretend they didn't. That's why people get afraid of you, when you start seeing things too clearly, when you stop accepting the script they hand you and begin reading the lines hidden between the lines. They don't like that. They don't like being observed. They don't like feeling transparent, exposed, readable. They built these delicate paper, thin identities, hoping no one will notice the cracks in their confidence or the stains on their conscience. But then you come along, simply noticing, simply knowing. And that alone is enough to shake them, because being understood is far more frightening than being misunderstood. People fear being interpreted. They fear someone who looks at their smile and says, "There's something behind that." They fear someone who listens to their excuses and hears the truth trapped underneath. They fear someone who watches their behavior instead of their theatrics. When people are hiding something, anything, guilt, insecurity, secrets, regrets, they can't stand a person who pays attention. It feels like standing under a spotlight they never agreed to step into. And once they become afraid, oh, the reactions are fascinating. Some start avoiding you, like your presence alone might peel back the lies they depend on. Others try to be overly friendly, hoping distraction will keep you from noticing the flicker in their eyes. And some get angry, furious even, because anger is the last shield they have when fear threatens to expose them. They say things like, "Why are you acting strange?" or "You're imagining things." But their panic always leaks through the cracks. You become a mirror they aren't ready to look into. Not because you're dangerous, but because you reflect the truths they've been burying. People who hide things live in constant dread of discovery. They don't fear consequences as much as they fear recognition. The idea that someone might actually see them, not the curated version, not the costume, but the real trembling core underneath. That terrifies them more than anything. And here's the twist half the time. You haven't even said anything. Just your awareness is enough. People sense when someone has stepped outside the illusion. They feel it like a cold breeze slipping under a locked door. They can't explain it, but they know it. They know you aren't fooled by the stories they tell themselves. And that alone shakes them, because deep down, everyone knows the difference between being watched and being understood. Being watched is uncomfortable. Being understood is terrifying. And when someone believes you've uncovered something hidden, something they prayed would stay buried, they don't fear revenge, or confrontation, or exposure. They fear the possibility that the comfortable world they built was never as solid as they pretended. Silence is the sweetest gift ever handed to those who don't deserve it. It wraps them up like a warm blanket, shields them from consequences, and lets them wander around untouched, while everyone else pretends not to notice the mess they're leaving behind. It's fascinating how people convince themselves that staying quiet equals staying safe, as if ignoring a fire ever stopped a building from burning, as if refusing to acknowledge a storm ever kept it from tearing the roof off. Silence doesn't protect the innocent. It protects the comfortable, and the comfortable are always the first to turn their eyes away when something ugly begins to grow right under their noses. You'd think that when something feels wrong, people would speak. But no. They swallow their words, tuck their suspicions under their tongue, and tell themselves it's better not to cause trouble. Trouble. What a funny little word. Trouble is just truth wearing boots. People aren't afraid of trouble. They're afraid of the responsibility that comes with saying out loud what they already know in their bones. They fear being the first voice in a silent room, the one who breaks the illusion everyone else desperately wants to keep alive. So they keep quiet. And in that quiet, the worst people flourish. Not because they're powerful, not because they're clever, only because no one is willing to interrupt them. Silence turns small wrongs into big ones. It transforms suspicion into impunity. It acts like fertilizer, helping deception grow tall enough to cast shadows over everyone. And the more people stay quiet, the more they start pretending that their silence is noble. I don't want to get involved. It's not my business. Someone else will handle it. Those phrases aren't shields. They're escape routes. They make people believe they're staying out of chaos, when in reality they're feeding it. It's amusing watching how quickly blame gets passed around. People whisper about the villainy they won't confront. They complain about the consequences they helped create. They shake their heads in disappointment at situations they were too timid to interrupt. And then, when everything finally spirals out of control, they gasp and say, "How did this happen?" As if they weren't holding the door open the entire time with their refusal to acknowledge what was brewing. There's a certain irony in how people treat truth. Everyone claims they want it. Honesty matters, they say. Integrity counts, they say. But when truth actually shows up raw and unpolished, they recoil like it's something dangerous. Because truth demands action. It demands confrontation. It demands admitting that you saw something wrong and chose to do nothing. People hate that. They'd rather pretend the truth is optional, a suggestion, an inconvenience they can file away for later. And those who benefit from that silence, they adore it. They thrive in it. They learn quickly that, as long as they keep their voice calm, their smile steady, their intentions vaguely wrapped in polite gestures, nobody will challenge them. They know the crowd is easy to manipulate because the crowd doesn't want to play detective. The crowd wants to avoid discomfort. That's their weakness. Silence isn't just permission, it's an invitation, an open door, a green light, and the ones with selfish motives walk right through it, waving as they pass by. It's strange, really, how silence spreads. One person hesitates, then another, and soon the whole room is holding its breath. Everyone waiting for someone else to speak first. But nobody does. And in that vacuum, the most dangerous voices become the loudest. Not because they're strong, but because they're unopposed. Noise isn't power. Silence is. Silence gives them the stage, the audience, the authority, all without earning it. And the funniest part, people always pretend they didn't know. When the truth finally comes crashing down, they start rewriting history. I never trusted them. I had a feeling. I knew something was off. But where was that insight when it mattered? Where was that courage when speaking up would have stopped the damage? Convenient hindsight is the favorite escape hatch of the silent. It lets them avoid responsibility while pretending they were wiser than they acted. But deep down, they know. They know their silence wasn't innocence. It was fear dressed as neutrality. They know that by holding their tongue, they handed power to the very people they later claimed to despise. And they know that evil doesn't need brilliance or strength or influence to grow. It only needs a room full of people too afraid to interrupt it. It's amusing how people talk about corruption like it's some grand monster stomping across the world, roaring, destroying everything in sight. They imagine it loud, obvious, dramatic. But real corruption, the kind that actually shapes lives, bends futures, poisons whole rooms without anyone noticing. That kind is quiet, whisper, soft, polite. It wears clean shoes and a respectable smile. It shakes your hand, compliments your efforts, and then slips a little darkness into your pocket when you're not looking. By the time you feel the weight of it, it's already been there far too long. Corruption doesn't announce itself. It prefers the shadows between normal moments. It loves routine more than chaos. It hides behind everyday gestures, an innocent favor, a harmless suggestion, a tiny compromise that feels too small to matter. People think corruption arrives in big leaps, but it almost always arrives in inches. Just a little bend here, just a small justification there. Everyone does it. It's not a big deal. No one will notice. And those tiny choices pile up like dust. One day you finally look around and everything is coated in it. What makes corruption so effective is its ability to mimic normality. It blends into the rhythm of everyday life so perfectly that people forget to question it. They move through their routines, nodding, smiling, agreeing, never realizing that the very things they shrug off are shaping them. It's like a slow leak in a wall. You don't hear it, you don't see it, but the rot spreads anyway. And once it spreads far enough, people don't even remember what the room looked like before the damage. The most fascinating part is how willingly people participate in it. Not because they're evil, but because corruption offers comfort, convenience, shortcuts. It gives people tiny rewards for tiny compromises. And people love tiny rewards. They love feeling like they've been given a little advantage, a little secret path, a little unspoken permission. They tell themselves it's harmless. They tell themselves it's temporary. But corruption never stays small. It grows by feeding on the little lies people tell themselves to avoid feeling guilty. Those who benefit from corruption rarely see themselves as villains. They see themselves as practical, clever survivors in a world that is just the way it is. They justify every choice as necessary, as normal, as something anyone would do. They become experts at convincing themselves that the wrong thing is actually the right thing if you tilt your head a certain way. And once they begin believing their own excuses, the corruption spreads from their actions into their identity. That's when things get interesting. Once corruption becomes part of who they are, they can no longer tell the difference between integrity and performance. But corruption doesn't only grow in the hearts of individuals. It grows in the silence of the people around them, the coworkers who look away, the friends who don't ask questions, the family members who say, "Let it go, it's not worth the trouble." Corruption thrives when people convince themselves that morality is someone else's job, that justice is someone else's responsibility, that accountability is someone else's problem. And while everyone waits for someone else to do something, corruption relaxes, stretches its legs, and settles in like a guest who has no intention of leaving. There's something fascinating about the way corruption makes people reshape their own reality. They build stories to defend their compromises. They rewrite events to paint themselves as victims or heroes, never as the ones who contributed to the rot. They pull the shades down on their conscience, dim the lights, and pretend they're sitting in a cozy room instead of a sinking ship. Corruption doesn't need to trick them. They do the tricking themselves. It simply provides the stage. But the most dangerous form of corruption is the kind that becomes so normal, no one questions it anymore. When people adapt to wrongness the way they adapt to weather, when they don't notice the change because the change happened a little at a time, when the outrageous becomes expected, when the unacceptable becomes routine, that is when corruption becomes powerful, not because of force, but because of familiarity. And the truth is, corruption never needs to shout, never needs to threaten, never needs to push. All it needs is for people to stop paying attention, to stop caring, to stop questioning. And once they stop, the rest is easy. Corruption doesn't conquer, it settles, it sinks in. It becomes part of the furniture, part of the conversation, part of daily life. And by the time people decide to take a closer look, they can't tell where corruption ends and normal life begins. It's funny how people cling to the idea of truth, like it's some shiny little treasure locked safely in a box somewhere. They talk about it with such confidence, such certainty, as if they already know exactly what it looks like, as if they've shaken hands with it. But truth isn't a treasure. It's more like a mirror someone keeps dropping, shattering it into 1,000 jagged pieces. Everyone picks up one piece, holds it in front of their face, and swears they're looking at the whole picture. They're so proud, so sure, that their little shard is the real truth, the complete truth, the only truth. And they never notice the blood on their fingers from holding it too tightly. The interesting part is that people don't actually want truth, not the real kind, anyway. They want the version of truth that makes them feel comfortable, the version that flatters them, reassures them, tells them they're on the right path. They want a truth that doesn't challenge the stories they've built around their lives, the identities they guard so desperately. They want a truth that behaves, a truth that sits quietly in the corner and doesn't make a mess, but real truth. Real truth is messy, loud, unpredictable. It doesn't ask permission before kicking down the door. And yet, people spend their whole lives avoiding it. They surround themselves with noise to drown out the uncomfortable parts. They turn to distractions, excuses, illusions, anything to avoid looking at the things that lurk beneath their polished surfaces. They tell themselves they're honest people while constructing whole worlds out of convenient lies. Small lies, gentle lies, lies that cushion them from the sharp edges of reality. They build these little nests made out of denial and half-truths, hoping it will keep them warm. But it never does, not for long.